So if you've built a website or you're in the process of building a website, one of the key factors to making sure that you get visitors and keep visitors is the speed at which your site loads and operates. If you're new to the whole caching side of things and the thoughts of CDNs just leave you cold, today's video I think is going to be perfect for you. I'm going to give you an introduction to dealing with setting up caching software, CDNs, dealing with Gzip, all those kinds of really daunting kinds of tasks. So if you're new to all this and you want to find out how to optimize your website from the start and also make sure it's optimized moving forward, join me in today's video and I'm going to take you through all of that right now. So let's just go back to the office and take a look. So let me just start this video off by saying what it is we're going to do, why I'm doing it, and hopefully you'll see the reasoning behind it and maybe implement this into your own sort of work process. Now, a lot of the videos you'll see online when it comes to look at these speed tests and how you can just stick a plugin on there and you can take a site from a 10-second site to a 2-second site, you're basically trying to shoehorn a solution into a problem and hoping that it'll fix it through various different means. If those sites had been started off and built with these tools in place and some of the practices we're going to take a look at in place, then hopefully what this would do is it would you start off with a better starting point and you wouldn't retrospectively try to sort out problems. With that being said, what are we going to do and what are we working with? Well, I've got a typical site. It's not a complex site. It's not a massive site. It's already got a fairly decent starting point. But it's a site that ultimately, if you hand it off to a client, that site would grow. Content would be added to it, either via projects, via new information, new staff, new current vacancies, all kinds of different things. So what technologies am I using to build this site? First of all, we're obviously using WordPress in this example. We're using the Hello theme, so we've got a pretty bare bones starting point, which, like I said before, it is a good starting point to have a theme that isn't massive and overkill for what you're trying to achieve. It's a fairly simple stripped back design. None of these images have been compressed prior to upload, so there's an issue there we need to deal with. And normally I would deal with optimizing the images before uploading, but when you hand it off to a client, you don't necessarily have that luxury. So we're going to take a look at how we can optimize images before uploading and also how we can optimize images that have already been uploaded and optimize images that will be uploaded in the future by the client, giving us 3 points of attack, should we say, to optimizing images. We're using Elementor, which is a page builder, so that's already pushing us back to more bloated code than we'd have if we were using just a theme and maybe just WordPress on its own. So there's already a bit of a negative impact by using that. This isn't singling out Elementor. All page builders will suffer from code bloat. It's just the way that they're created. We've got things like positions, current vacancies, and so on. This is using advanced custom fields. So these are custom designed pages with custom sections inside there, and you can take a look at each of the individual items. We've got projects, which is a filterable gallery. So you can see we can filter through this. Images are playing a big part on this site, and you can take a look at any of these images and you'll take a look at the project then, which again is a large image. It's all set up, optimized to be using ACF, custom design templates, and so on. So it's a good starting point. It's a typical kind of starting point for a smaller project. If you're working with larger projects, I still think most of what we're going to cover in this video will be applicable to those bigger projects. It's a case of good practice from the get-go as opposed to retrospectively trying to sort out issues. Okay, so that's the site we're working with. What tools are we going to use? Well, we're going to take a look at optimizing the images, like I've said before, uploading, when we upload them, and also anything that's already installed on the site. If you're using something like SiteGround, which is what I'm using here for my hosting, and we're using the lowest package available on there, the sort of couple of pounds, couple of dollars a month kind of thing, we're going to take a look at enabling Gzip, which normally at this point in time isn't auto-enabled as part of SiteGround. However, take a look at whatever hosting company you're working with, because Gzip can make a difference. We're going to take a look at how we can set up a CDN. We're going to use a low-cost option that has a great sort of reputation. This is Bunny CDN. So if you don't want to spend a huge amount of money, Bunny CDN is a good option. And we're also going to take a look at a plugin that then will help us to optimize the site now and moving forward. So with those things being said, let's take a look at how we start things off with the images and how we can take a look at optimizing those before we even start. Now, there are various different ways in which you can compress and optimize your images prior to uploading them to your site. Two of my favorite would be Short Pixel and also Tiny PNG or Tiny JPEG is the same site. They both work in pretty much the same way. You upload an image, you can then have that automatically compressed and you can download it with a nice saving. If you have PNG files, especially PNG 24 with transparency, saving those out of Photoshop, they're still pretty big. So using something like Tiny PNG or the optimized options in ShortPixel will give you a decent saving on there. Nice thing with ShortPixel, you can take a look at it before and after, so you can compare things. You also have the option for different compression ratios. So if we go to compress, for example, we have lossy, glossy, and lossless. Whereas with Tiny PNG and Tiny JPEG, you literally just upload and you're given just the end result. You don't really get a huge amount of options with the free version. However, with Tiny PNG and Tiny JPEG, you do have the option to purchase a Photoshop plugin, which will give you this basically built into Photoshop. Now, I'm not going to go through in detail how to use these. They're pretty straightforward, especially when it comes to Tiny PNG or Tiny JPEG. You just literally drag and drop your files up on there. Same kind of thing goes with this, but you get the option to preview it as part of ShortPixel. The other thing that I like about ShortPixel is you can integrate this in, and I believe there's a free plan that gives you a small amount of compression every single month. However, the paid for plan, which I was lucky enough to grab myself a couple of deals over on AppSumo a little while back, gives you some great options. And that's what we're going to be using today for two different parts of this, when we're going to retrospectively compress images and how we can set it up to automatically compress images as they're uploaded to our site. We can also use this to automatically create WebP images as well if we want to. So ShortPixel is going to be my choice. However, it's entirely up to you if you wanted to use an alternative. But realistically, I would always recommend compressing your images, checking the quality before you upload things. But as I said at the top of this video, you don't always have that option when it comes to working with clients. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to take a look at. And we're going to do that first of all. We're going to install the plugin. We're going to link it up to my ShortPixel account and take a look at compressing those images and some of the options we have available. Before we do though, let's just quickly see what it is we're working with. I'm going to use GTmetrix for this initial result, but we'll take a look at some of the other sort of benchmarking things afterwards and see what they show us as well. But as you can see, we're not starting off too well, even with a pretty simplistic site. Our Y-slow score is pretty good, 90% is fairly respectable. Our page speed, not great. But the thing we're interested in, and this is where this may be an unpopular kind of way of looking at things, the most important aspect of any site and all of these different benchmarking sites is this. The actual load time. How long does it take for the end user to see a page being delivered to their browser? 4.3 seconds is over double what we need it to be. Ultimately, we want to be under 2 seconds on our load time, our fully loaded time. Now, there will be also sort of people saying about getting higher scores when we're using page speed by Google, and there's some merit in optimizing it for that kind of thing. However, the bottom line is still comes down to that fully loaded time. Yes, there are going to be some detrimental effects for various different things with your search engine optimization side of things, but always work for the end user, what they're going to see when they land on your site. Under 2 seconds should be your goal. Under 1 would be amazing. So that's what we're going to work towards in this. Right, now we've done that, let's take a look at installing those plugins and getting everything set up with our ShortPixel account. To speed things up, I've already gone ahead, installed the ShortPixel Image Optimizer plugin. I've activated it. So all we need to do now is take a look at how we set things up. So when you open up and you install this, you're going to get offered two different things. One is the email address to request an API access. The second is to supply an API key. If you have an account, you should have an API key available to you. So we'll hop over to my ShortPixel account, and when you log in, you're going to get this information, which is your plans and pricing. I'm not going to go over this in detail, but currently it looks like they're offering double credits for basically the same price. So $9.99 for 20,000 credits. That's pretty good going. That's 20,000 images you could optimize for $10. Anyway, with that being said, we want the API keys option. And in there, we've got the API keys. So I'm going to take my API key, come back over into the ShortPixel plugin, and we're just going to drop that API key in there, hit validate. That's going to go and check everything is in place and take us over now into the ShortPixel plugin settings. And this is where we start working on things. You can see we've got some really basic options, include thumbnails, create an image backup. What this will do is it'll create a folder on your server and keep a copy of the original uncompressed, unmodified images. So if anything happens, you can roll back to those, or you could just go back and re-optimize them if you needed to. If you don't have tens of thousands of images and you have enough space on your server, I would recommend use that image backup. Even if you only use it to start off with, while you make sure everything is working and then you clean it out afterwards, just gives you that little bit of a fail-safe. Remove EXIF data. If you're working with a site that doesn't require that information, remove it because it is going to make your file sizes a little smaller. You can resize larger images and you can set a maximum size on there to optimize them. I'm going to leave those as they are. We've also then got the 3 different compression levels: lossy, glossy, and lossless. Now, lossy is going to give you the best compression, but with the highest level of artifacts. In other words, if you have photographs with lots of intricate details, you may start to see some detrimental effects on the image. However, making sure you have the image backup in place means that you can easily roll back individual images that don't look good and reapply a different level of compression to them if you want to. We'll take a look at that a little later on because I'm going to compress everything to lossy, and we'll find that the larger hero images on the site will look a little bit rubbish because of it. But, depending upon what you want to do, you can choose whichever option fits best to your needs. Onto the advanced section. We've got additional media folders. If you want to drop things in there, you can do. But we're just going to choose the options that are most relevant to what I'm looking to do. I don't want to convert PNG images because that would then lose any of the transparency. You can set to create WebP images, and if your browser supports it, you can have this automatically create those. And you can see it says it creates those for free, so you're not going to have those taken out of your allowance, which is cool. If you choose that option, you can see it says deliver the WebP versions of the images in the front end. You can select that, and then you can choose how you want to approach it, whether you want to use the replacement of the picture tag or whether you want to, without altering any of the actual code on the page, just use the htaccess file. Up to you which way you want to go about that. If you're unsure, then probably leave it off. Okay, so everything else looks pretty good. We don't want to automatically optimize PDFs because we're not using any. And you can come down then, you can see we can say we want to exclude certain thumbnail sizes. So you can see we've got a list of different thumbnail image sizes. I'm going to say the tiny 150 by 150 thumbnails, I'm not too bothered about optimizing those. They're not used on the front end of this site. They're more than likely just used in the media library on the back end. But if you've got the credits and you want to optimize everything, then by all means go ahead and optimize everything. We can now say save and go to bulk process, and what that's going to do is it's going to tell us how many images we have that it's going to optimize, gives us the option to include or exclude thumbnails, and tells us whether we want to create the WebP version. So it tells us we've got 66 images. I'm going to leave all the options set as they are and just hit that start optimizing. This is then going to start the optimization process. It'll tell you how long it's going to take. Once that's finished, then we're ready to move on and take a look at what impacts that actually has on the site load times. And there we go. There's our optimization all finished. And you can see we've saved about 61% over the original file sizes. Hovering over, it gives us some more information about it, what was processed, etc, etc, etc. You can, if you want to, bulk delete your metadata and a few other things. Pretty cool plugin though to start off with. Now, if we come back over into the media library, with this plugin installed, we have this new option down on the right-hand side. So let's just say, for example, these slider images don't look great. What we can do is we can click on there and we can say to compare. We can re-optimize lossless, re-optimize glossy, or restore backup. So if we click on compare, that's going to allow us to compare the before and after. So we can see the degradation that may have been impacting this particular image. Now you can't really see it great on there because it's quite a small thumbnail image. However, if we jump over to the front end of the site and we'll refresh this, we can take a look. And if you think the image doesn't look great, which you can see there's some quite horrible banding inside the actual heading section, and the same with this one, we could easily come back into our media library. And what we can do is we can click and we can say re-optimize glossy. So in other words, that's going to use some optimization, but it's also going to do it to a lesser degree. You can restore the backup if you wanted to. We'll say re-optimize glossy. You can see that says now image waiting to be reprocessed, and we'll do the same then for our other slider, re-optimize glossy. and let those go through. And we should then find that gives us the quality back. Obviously, we're going to have a slightly larger file size, but sometimes this is the price you have to pay. Remember, your site still has to look good to visitors, even if it's being served up quickly. If it looks rubbish when they get there, it's not going to give the greatest impression. So with all of these kinds of things, there's always a bit of a balancing act to get quality versus speed. That's the kind of thing you've got to look to work with. Okay, so now we see we've got a smaller level of saving, 13.17 and just under 23, but there's still savings in the file sizes. They're still going to be better. Now, you may not be able to see the differences when we're looking on the screen on YouTube because it does compress things anyway. So you may still see it doesn't look the greatest. That's probably because we're still running a cached version, and we're also, like I say, we're using YouTube, which compresses things anyway. Okay, so that's the first side of things that I wanted to cover. Heading back over to GTmetrix, I've run the test again, and you can see we're now to 2.7 seconds. So we've already shaved off about 1.5 seconds by doing that. So we're already onto a good sort of step forward. Our page speed has gone up to 75%, so we're looking pretty good to start off with, and that's just with optimizing these images. Next up on our list, if you're using SiteGround and you don't have Gzip compression enabled, it's very easy to enable. I'll put a link to this particular article so you can just simply copy this code over. But I'll show you this. If you want to skip past this, you skip past it. There's time signatures in the description below. So if this isn't applicable to you, by all means, just skip past it. But it's super easy to do. What we're going to do is we jump over into SiteGround, into our account, into the file manager, and open up the public HTML folder for the site that you want to add Gzip into. Inside there, you'll find a file called .htaccess. What we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to click on edit. I'm going to scroll down and make sure that we don't have that code in there already by mistake. We'll just drop in underneath and we'll just paste that little block of code in, and we'll just hit save on there. That now should enable Gzip as part of your SiteGround account. If it's already enabled, you're not going to see any problem doing this, but it is one of those things that I don't believe at this point in time, and I could be wrong, please correct me in the comment section if I am. I don't think Gzip is enabled by default on your SiteGround accounts. Okay, so that's how simple it is to just add in Gzip. Obviously, if you're using a different hosting company and they don't have Gzip enabled, reach out to their tech support, ask them can they enable it, and if they can't enable it on a sort of global level, ask them how you can enable it on your particular server or your particular hosting account for the site you're working with. They should be pretty helpful and get that info over to you pretty quickly. So next up on our list is we're going to be using WP Rocket as the particular caching plugin of choice in this example. There are other options available, and I've done a comparison video of several of the top ones, including WP Rocket. So if you want to check that out, put a link in the description so you can take a look. I'll put a link in the corner right now as well so you can check that out and you can see a comparison. However, WP Rocket is one of those ones that the cost is good, the feature set is good, and it's fairly straightforward to use. It has a great reputation, so it's one I would say it's worth checking out. But like I say, check out that video to see if you think any other options would be better suited to your specific requirements. Now, I've already bought a copy of WP Rocket. This is paid for out of my own pockets. This isn't sponsored, endorsed, or anything else. We're going to activate the plugin. Once that's activated, we should then start benefiting just by the default basic options that we have as part of WP Rocket. So that's already set up. Let's go into the settings and take a look at what we have there. Okay, so there's the WP Rocket dashboard, and as you can see, there are quite a lot of different options. However, it is automatically optimizing straight after you install it. So you could, if you wanted to, just run with a completely stock install like this. And what we'll do is we'll just quickly take a look to see what difference that's made to our load time before we start making any tweaks and before we take a look at any form of CDN. Okay, so while our page score and Y-slow score haven't changed, our fully loaded time now is sub 2 seconds. It's worth bearing in mind though that whenever you use something like GTmetrix or Pingdom, you are going to see a fluctuation in various different settings. Specifically, this one, the fully loaded time. So I would always suggest when you do this, run several different, sort of times of doing a performance test and take a mean average. Don't just sort of find the highest or the lowest one and use that as an indicative example of what it's like. Plus also use tools like Pingdom, just to get an idea of what it's like across various different platforms, various different sort of speed test methods. They're all going to have their own little quirks and their own little fluctuations. There's just a ton of different variables at play here. Okay, so we can see that we are looking pretty good. We still have some page speed score things we could deal with, getting some better options inside there, but we are now sitting at that sub 2 second side of things. Okay, so let's go back into WP Rocket and take a look at what we have inside here. Well, this is not an exhaustive test of WP Rocket. This is for the average person that just wants to get a faster loading website. What are the basic things you can do to just improve it? You could just go with the stock settings like we just seen, but there are still a few other little things that you could do just to speed things up that extra little bit. Okay, so dashboard, it's just telling us what's going on kind of thing. If we take a look at the cache, we can see this is where the basic caching options are. So it's enabled. Do we want to enable caching for mobile devices? Generally you do, because obviously you want people with mobile devices on 4G, 5G and so on to have a good experience. You can set whatever you want to up inside here. It's really basic. If you need help, everything is available with some help information. File optimization. This is where you probably are going to start taking a look at different things. This is where you can do what's called minification. And all minification really means is it gets rid of things like spaces, blank lines, comments, and so on from your HTML files, your CSS files, and your JavaScript files. You can also have the option to combine multiple files together into one. So for example, you may have several different CSS files, one for your theme, you could have several for your page builder, you may have done some custom CSS that might have a separate CSS file. You can combine those all into one, so it makes a bigger file, but if you minify that and combine them into one, there's less round trips between your server and the browser, which ultimately should make up for the increase in file size by reduced round trip latency. Again, I hope that makes sense. The thing you have to bear in mind though is that these can cause issues with various different themes, various different setups. So don't just enable everything, click OK, and then just go on to the next set of options. With anything to do with using any kind of tool like this, just minimal changes, save, clear the cache, test, make sure everything works okay, then repeat to the next option, the next option. Yes, it may take a little time, but there's nothing worse than going through choosing 10 different options, saving it, going to your site, and then realizing it doesn't work. You've got to go back, undo all those 10 options, providing you can remember what they are, and then go through them one at a time to sort the problems out. So let's start off by the minify HTML. We can click on that, we'll come down, save our changes. Once that's saved, we should see it's going to tell us it's now going to go through and preload these to make sure that the cache is refreshed. You can, if you want to, also come up, hit the clear cache to make sure that everything is nice and clear. You can see that's now done 8 pages, which I think that's all that's on the site at the moment. So we can then come back over to the site, do a forced refresh, make sure that the pages are still loading in, that all the different things are working. So if we go to team, for example, the page still loads up, goes to the right section, all those kinds of things. So taking a bit of time just helps make sure that everything is working okay. Come back to the file optimization, and this time we'll go on to the CSS files. So we'll say minify the CSS files. You can see that gives us a warning because, like I said, it can break your site. We'll activate that. We'll combine them as well. We'll say activate that, and we'll say optimize CSS delivery. So we're only doing one section at a time. So if something breaks, we know it's going to be to do with the CSS minification. Do the same thing again, save our changes, let that recache and reload those pages for us, clear our cache at the top if we want to, and we should be okay. And you can see it tells us critical CSS generation is currently running 1 out of 10 pages, types completed. So this is going through the process, so give it a little time. The bigger the site, the more of these sort of optimizations that have to be run. Give it time to go through and do everything before you go and check it out, because otherwise you could go through half through the optimizations and things are still not completed. May look okay, you move on, come back, and something's broken. So there you go, those critical CSS have all been created. We can come back to our site now, we'll refresh this, make sure everything is working okay. So we'll just jump around a couple of pages just to check everything is looking good. Go to this section, for example. Okay, so everything is looking okay, so we know that's completed successfully. Finally, we'll do the same thing then for the JavaScript. So remove JavaScript or jQuery migrate, minify this. Again, we're going to get that notification just saying that it could break something. Say yes, we're okay with that. We'll enable the minify JavaScript files, blah, blah, blah. Load JavaScript deferred. Yep, so we'll save the changes on there. And again, we're going to let it go through the cache side of things. Okay, that's done. I've cleared my cache. We jump back over to the site. And you can see this isn't the most exciting thing in the world to be doing. It is kind of quite slow and laborious and repetitive. But what it does do is it makes sure that everything is working. So when you make changes, you don't cock everything up. Okay, so those side of things are done for us. Let's quickly run another GTmetrix test. And I'm going to do GTmetrix tests on everything. I'm just going to show you some of the basic things, but I want to do it at the beginning so you can see the process that I go through when I'm setting this up for a site. So come back to this, and again, we're going to run through a test. Okay, so with those tweaks, we now are seeing a little bit of a difference. Our Y-slow score has gone from 90% to 97%, so that's a nice little increase. Our fully loaded time has dropped by 0.2 seconds, and our file size has come down from 1.35 megabytes to 1.33. Not really much, but then we're not dealing with a massive site. You should see a noticeable difference if the site is more comprehensive and complex. Our requests, however, have dropped from 50 requests to 17. So you can see what I'm talking about, cutting down that round trip between sort of sending a request for a file and having it back multiple times for multiple CSS, multiple jQuery files and so on. That has made quite a nice difference. Okay, so what else do I recommend taking a look at as a bare minimum when you're using something like WP Rocket? Well, let's take a look. We've done the file optimization. Let's have a quick look at media, for example. Now, you can see we've got lazy load. Now, lazy load is just simply a way of deferring the loading of images and things like that until you start to scroll down the page, and just before they kind of come into your browser window, into view, they then load in. So it means you don't have to load all of the images on a page if quite a lot of those are below the fold. So should speed things up. So we'll say enable for images. You've also have the option for iframes and videos. So if you use those on your site, it's worth enabling those options. And you see it says replace YouTube iframe with preview image. If you're using that feature, you can enable it. For me, I'm not using any of those, so I'm just going to disable that option. You've then got disable emojis. I would recommend doing that for the most part because it's not really used in a lot of ways. WordPress embeds. This prevents you from embedding content from other non-whitelisted sites. If you don't do that, you can leave it. WebP compatibility. You can see this tells us because we're using short pixel, we can also use WP Rocket to deliver those images for you. So you can say enable that. We'll hit save changes on there. So that will now go through and should speed things up, like I say, if you've got lots of images. Preload. Do you want to activate preloading? I would recommend take a look through this and see if it's something you think is worthwhile. Advanced rules. I would say if you're comfortable using this, you're probably not going to be watching this video because this is going to be way too basic for you. But if you want to take a look at the need help. If you try any of these out, if you start to get comfortable and you want to test it out, do like I said at the beginning. Enable something, set something up, save it, test it. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Don't kill your website by just running through a ton of different options. Your database. You can see we've got post revisions and drafts will permanently be deleted. These are just things that if you have a site that's regularly having content added to it, you're going to find you probably have a ton of revisions, ton of drafts, so on. You can see I've got 148 revisions in my database. That's going to slow things down in your database because your database is going to get bigger. So you can use this to clean things up if you want to. So I would recommend doing that on a semi-regular basis just to clean up any junk that you may have sort of encountered. CDN, we're going to come back to that in a moment. So you've got things like control WordPress heartbeat. I've never used this. I have no idea what it does, so I'm not even going to touch upon that. But again, read the help if you're interested. Add-ons currently has just a couple of options, and these are one-click Rocket add-ons, so you can add these into things. So if you're using Google Tracking, Google into Facebook Pixel and so on, you can enable those. If you're on Cloudways, then you may want to look at enable and varnish if you're using that for your caching, because I believe that runs on Cloudways, so you may want to enable that. If you're using Cloudflare, you have that option, or Sakuri, you have that option. So I'm not using any of those, so I don't need to worry about them. Image optimization. Now, unfortunately, this is a service that they want to tie into WP Rocket. It's one of their sister company kind of things called Imagify. If you don't want to use Short Pixel and you want to use something that's integrated into WP Rocket for a one sort of stop shop for all this, by all means, take a look at Imagify. I'm not using it. I'm using Short Pixel because that's my preferred option. Okay, so then you've got tools, so you can export your settings. So you've got a good starting point on other sites. If you're using the same server and a similar setup, could be useful. And you've got rollback and so on to allow you to roll back to previous versions of the actual plugin itself. And finally, you've got tutorials to just give you a head start. So that's basically WP Rocket in a nutshell. We've gone through some of the most important things, but there are tons of other options there should you want to dig in a little deeper. Now, the last thing we're going to take a look at is a CDN, or Content Delivery Network. If you're not sure what a CDN is, just think of it as like a copy of various different files for your website in different parts of the world on different servers that are closer to your potential audience. So let's just say that your server is based in the UK, but a big chunk of your audience are in America. Then having to come all the way over to a UK-based server could be quite slow for your US audience. Using a CDN means that key files are stored in a server location closer to those in America, which means that they just go to that CDN server and grab the relevant files as opposed to coming all the way over to a UK-based server. Your CDN can have multiple different countries with different servers in, and it could have multiple different servers in an individual country to speed things up. Bunny CDN is a great option for those of us who don't have a massive budget, but you want to benefit from a CDN. Now, why is it such a good option? Pricing. That's the key thing here. You can see that we've got 4 different locations: Europe and North America, Asia, Oceania, and so on. These are your standard options. So for smaller sites, they're going to be perfectly fine. If you have a much bigger site, then you have these options for higher volume. And as you can see, the price increases based upon various different factors. But you can see for Europe and North America, it's going to cost you 1 cent or 0.1 cent per gigabyte. That's pretty good going. So you can use this and you can easily have a pretty popular site without having to spend more than maybe a couple of dollars a month to get CDNs in various different countries. The other nice thing is you can pick and choose what CDNs you want. In other words, you may have a large audience in Europe and North America, but next to nothing in Africa, South America, and Asia. Well, instead of having to have all 4 of these, you can just choose Europe and North America, and you only pay for the CDN and the traffic that goes through it in that particular location on those servers, which I think is great. So what I've done is I've set up a basic free account, a 14-day trial account, which I would recommend that you do to see how much of an impact it can make on your site. This isn't the only CDN. There are tons of CDN options available, and it all depends what you want to do. Bunny is one that's been recommended umpteen times on different places that I've got, the Facebook group and so on. So that's the reason why we're taking a look at that today. It seems to be quite highly regarded. Now, once you've signed up for this trial, and the nice thing to bear in mind here is you don't need to put a credit card or any payment details in for this test 14-day account. So that's pretty cool. Now, once you set your account up, you're going to need to create what's called a pull zone. Now, this might sound complicated, but it's really super simple. I've already created one for the test site that we're going to be using, but I'll show you how to create one anyway. Click to add a new pull zone. And it says, okay, what are you going to do? We've got the name, which is just going to be the name of this current pull zone. So we'll just call this test WPTuts. So you can see it also puts this little sort of URL at the end of it. Don't need to worry about that. Then the origin URL, which in other words is just your site. So if we come back to our main site, we'll copy the URL. Now you can't see that unfortunately because of the way I've got my screen set up, but all I've done is I've copied that URL. We'll drop that inside there. And then you've got 2 options, the standard tier or the high volume tier. We're going to stay on the standard tier because that is the cheapest for the most option. And like I say, that's going to give you, for smaller sites, it's going to be perfect. So we'll leave that option, and then you've got the different pricing zones. So it tells you how much you're going to pay per gigabyte for each one of these different zones. If you don't want to use any zones, you simply click on it to disable them. So this example, we're only going to have a CDN pull zone set up in Europe and North America, which is where the bulk of my audience are going to be. And we say add pull zone, and you created a pull zone. It's as simple as that. If you jump over to the WordPress then to say, if you're using website, WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, and so on, we're using WordPress, click over there. You can see all we really need to do is install the Bunny CDN plugin and just grab this bit of information. So let's do that now. Let's come back over into our dashboard, and we're going to come back into our plugins. I've already gone ahead and downloaded this. I just haven't activated it yet. So we're going to come down and we can see Bunny CDN. We'll activate that. Once that's activated, we'll say clear cache for WP Rocket, and we're going to come into Bunny CDN. And you can see this just wants to pull zone name. So all we're going to do, come back in, copy that from there. So we'll just copy it. And then what you can do is you come back into this, you can drop that inside there, and we'll say enable Bunny CDN. Once that's been enabled, you can see we can now clear the cache, or we can switch to advanced view. So if you switch to advanced view, all you have inside there is just some extra information, which is already pre-set up for you anyway. So you don't need to worry about setting anything inside here. If you want to put the API key in, you can do that, and that's easy to get hold of. Come back over into here, and if we come into our account, go into our account icon at the top, and you can see inside there, there's our API. So all we need to do is enable that by viewing it, copy it, and simply just drop that into the relevant box inside there. Update your CDN, clear your cache, and you are golden. Now, because we're using WP Rocket, we've got to tell that we're also going to be using Bunny CDN. So all we need to do is go back into our settings section, back into WP Rocket, and inside there, we've got the option for CDN. So we're going to click on there, and you can see it says it wants the CDN name. So how do we find that bit of info? We do that by going back to our Bunny CDN account, go to our pull zones, choose the pull zone that we want. So the example is this test WPTuts, that's one we just created. I'm going to click on that, and inside there we now have our host name and we have our origin URL. We're going to grab this host name, going to copy that, come back over into WP Rocket, and we're just going to paste that inside there, and we're going to come down and say save changes. And that's all there is to it. So now we can go ahead and just test that out. Once it's recached this, we'll just clear the cache again on there to make sure everything is done. And what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that that's all working and we are actually using the CDN. To test that out, I've opened up an incognito window, loaded the site in, and all we're going to do is we're going to open up the developer tools by pressing F12. Once we open that up, we're going to go to the sources tab, and from there we're looking for this, which is that Bunny CDN pull zone. You can see test wptuts.b-cdn.net, which is exactly what we saw inside here at the top, which is the host name. So with that all set up, we can just make sure we can see exactly what information is being displayed inside there. So you can see if we expand this out, we've got WP contents and WP include are being served from that CDN. Simple as that. So that's all been done, set up, and is working. And running that GT metrics test one final time, you can see this is what we're coming back in with. We've almost got perfect scores across the page speed and the Y slow. Our fully loaded time is down to 1.5 seconds, and our total page is down to less than 1 megabyte with a minuscule 12 requests. That's pretty good going. Now running the test over on Pingdom, you can see these are the values you're getting. We're getting a pretty good performance score. Page size, for some odd reason, there's a discrepancy between the two here. I'm not really sure why, but you can see the load time is 401 milliseconds, so less than half a second. So this is where I'm trying to say to you at the beginning of the video, you've got to use some of these as a starting point and get an idea of where you were to start off with and where you are afterwards. And also test it yourself, see how it feels to you. I mean, sometimes it's one of those things that all these speed tests in the world can be great, but they don't tell you what it's like to actually interact with the site yourself. Open up an incognito window so you're not having all the caching and everything going on from previous examples. Clear that out, start with a fresh section, and just test it out and see how it works. But this should give you a good starting point to some of the fundamental things you need to look at when you're first of all creating sites with optimization in mind, and also moving forward some of the tools that should ultimately make the whole process of expanding your site easier, knowing that you've got these various different things in place to optimize things as you move along. Secondly, as you make changes to a site, come back and test it out on a semi-regular basis, especially if there's a lot of content being added. Test different pages out, see how the different pages are optimized. Take that time to go through and make sure that everything is in place and tweak as and when necessary. But before you make any tweaks, make sure you run a backup. And if you haven't taken a look at doing backups, I'd recommend taking a look at the video that I'll pop in the corner now and in the description below, all about my whole backup process. So if you want to make changes and test things out, you've got that there to get site back online if anything happens and you lose everything. Okay, so I'm going to wrap the video up at this point. Hopefully this has been useful to you if you are new to working with any kind of caching and optimizing and so on. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, or let me know what results you've had, drop those in the comment section below, because I'd love to find out what you think of this tutorial, if it's helping you, and what tools you use to get great results. As always, all of the applicable links for everything I've covered in this video are in that description below. My name's been Paul C. This has been WPTuts, and until next time, take care.